Well, hello, everybody. This is Reverend Karen coming at you from the Woogie Ranch in the back 40 of northwestern Nevada. And this is another episode of Fearlessly Feral Living. This podcast explores real life ways to apply new thoughts, spiritual principles, and practices so that you can create a deeply successful and meaningful life. Fearlessly Feral Living is a focused ministry of Centers for Spiritual Living and devoted to cultivating a world where every person lives wild, awake, free, and unapologetically alive. So today, I'm going to talk about the most powerful creative process in the entire universe. That's probably not going to be the official title of this talk if you look it up. Um, It's about love and law. It's about, yeah, the creative process. So we'll see where I goes with the title. But how I got on this topic was I revisited a book that I've read before, of course, by Ernest Holmes, who's the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living, by the way. Um, he wrote this book a while back. It's called Love and Law. And I started reading this book and I was filled with all these wonderful revelations and aha moments once again as a result of reading it. I've got highlights everywhere in this book. I love this little book almost as much as I love the Science of Mind textbook. And this little book is actually not a book that he wrote. It's a transcription of a bunch of talks that he gave in, believe it or not, 1918. I think they updated the language a bit when they transcribed these talks. But that gives you an idea of how timeless these teachings are, how they cross generations, how they are applicable and valid and true no matter what generation we come from. So I just love it. And in this apparently he was rather outspoken in 1918 because in this book, he comes right out and he speaks the truth. He doesn't wrap things up in nice little packages to make it easier for people to digest what he's putting out there. So today, before we go any further, I'm going to invite you to put on your big girl panties or your big boy pants and listen with an open mind, and even better, an open heart, and see if you can't move into a place where this information sinks in. If you do, I promise it will improve your life. So, what's this thing called the law? Ernest Holmes talks about the law a lot. Here's the deal with the law: the law is part of a trinity meaning threefold, a beautiful and powerful triune of creativity in our lives. The law is the middle part, the part that takes our thoughts and manifests them. The law is like the channel. So in this triune, our thoughts are the top part, physical physical manifestation is the bottom part, and the law is the middle. And surrounding it all is love, or God, or spirit, or the force, or whatever you want to call it. We are this Trinity. This triune nature, it's ours. It's not something we do, it's something we be. The Trinity is not something to worship, it's something to be. It is thought, law, and manifestation, surrounded by and upheld by and given strength by and given power by a loving spirit that is everywhere present. A spirit that manifested us so that it could experience the physical, by the way. A spirit that does not do things, but supports us in our doing. Now, here's a big boy or girl panties part. A spirit that does not do things You might think this is a very radical way of thinking about God, but in this little book called Love and Law, Holmes comes right out and says it. He says, we have to accept the fact that the God to whom the human race has been praying does not exist. There is no such God. So chew on that for a while I'll move on. I've agreed with this statement since I found this teaching. In fact, I searched for this teaching because the God to whom the human race has prayed in my lifetime is not my God. It's never been my God. When I found this teaching, this one truth catapulted me from a life of victimhood to a life of empowerment. And it opened the doors to a much more rewarding life than I ever knew possible. And yet, this one idea, most folks resist it. The resistance is powerful and it's strong. Even people in this teaching resist it. So if you're resisting it, if you're resisting this one idea that God doesn't do things, it just empowers us to do it. Again, I'm inviting you. Put your big girl panties on or your big boy pants on and consider this with an open mind. Just play around with the possibilities of thinking like this. So, the triune of creativity simply does not work if one thinks that God is the one doing everything. If God does things, then what's the law for? The law is part of the triune. The law is the thing that's doing. Ernest Holmes says in the Science of Mind textbook that the law is mind in action. He says the law is a blind force, and whatever goes into the subjective state of our thought tends to return again as some condition. And he says, see the chapter on control of conditions for further elaboration. Now, here's another whammy for you. It cracks me up that he mentions control of conditions in the same paragraph defining the law, because we have this set of statements called the we believe statements in this teaching. And part of one of those statements says, we believe in control of conditions. And when you say that, most people are like, I'm out of here. Bye, see you later. They just throw their hands up and they run the other way. In fact, if you're a member of a 12-step group, the advice you are getting might seem completely contradictory to that we believe statement, except that it isn't. I've done a lot of study in this area. And I explain how it isn't contradictory in my first book, A New Thought Journey Through the 12 Steps. And there's a link to buy that book in the show notes. A New Thought Journey Through the 12 Steps. It's my first book, still available on Amazon, by the way, but the link is to my website. Anyway, believe me when I say that I've got almost 40 years in recovery, and this recovery has been awesome and good and very good and happy, joyous and free and powerful. And I absolutely do not have a problem with all the we believe statements. I have taken those statements and I have used them to catapult my life into success, and you can too. So yeah, I have some things to say about control of conditions. And in my third book, How to Live Fearlessly Feral, I say a lot of those things. So rather than get off track here, I'm just going to refer you back to the show notes where there's a web address to buy either one of those books, and you can read it for yourself and see what you think. And I'd love to hear that, by the way. My point in this podcast is, do you believe that the things Holmes is presenting to us are true? Because belief is pretty important in our teaching. In fact, Holmes comes right out and says, and listen carefully here, he says, if you believe it works, it will not. If you do not believe it works, it will not work, because everything is belief. I'll repeat that because I messed it up. If you do not believe it works, it will not work, because everything is belief. Our beliefs are the foundation of how our lives manifest. Period. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Whatever it is you believe, That's what's going to be showing up in your life. If you don't like what's happening in your life, change your belief. Unless, of course, you do not believe that our beliefs are the foundation of how our lives manifest. I don't understand how you could believe otherwise. If you want to explain it to me, I'm here to listen. So let's just say, as an example, for kicks and giggles, that you're unhappy with certain aspects of how your life is going. The place to address that is not by moving or changing doctors or changing partners or changing jobs or doing any outer change. The place to change is at the level of belief. The outer changes will willy-nilly come later. You won't even have to work at them. So we find ourselves in this place of asking, okay, how do I change a belief? Well, first step is to be aware that you have the belief in the first place. So I want to give you a common example of a belief. Here's a belief. You were probably fed this when you were a kid. Your parental units probably said this every time you wanted to buy something at the store. Money doesn't grow on trees, you know. Eventually, that became a belief. It was beaten into you, it was indoctrinated into you. You believe money doesn't grow on trees, which means you have a very limited idea of what money is. And behind this belief are all sorts of limiting patterns of thinking that'll keep you poor and limited in other ways, by the way. Just saying. Here's some questions to ask yourself whether or not you believe in this. Do you regularly experience not having enough money? Do you hoard your money? Do you purposely not buy something that you would love to have just because you think it costs too much? Do you vote with your money? Do you vote with your wallet? Because money is the most important thing to consider when choosing who you want to lead us? Dude, if you're voting with your wallet, we need to have a chat. If you answered yes to any of those questions, you might want to consider that you have a limiting belief about money. So let's say you discover, okay, I've got a limiting belief about money. And you decide you want to change that. Here's where that creative process that I mentioned earlier comes into play. Remember, thought, law, manifestation. Ooh, see this? Let me see if I can show this to you. I don't know if you can see that, but behind me, that thing right there, that's called our teaching symbol. Thought's the top part, law is the middle part, manifestation is the bottom part. The V is the process of going from thought to manifestation and back up to thought again. And the circle around it all, that's God or spirit, whatever you want to call it. That's why it's back there, by the way. It's why I also wear it on a chain around my neck. Yeah, this symbol here, it's a biggie. It's a biggie. So, you take those limiting thoughts and you change them by replacing them with new, not so limiting thoughts. But it goes deeper than just thoughts. Remember this. Thought plus feeling equals power. So there must be some feeling to accompany those thoughts. You can change the thoughts willy-nilly all you want, but if you aren't feeling them, you're just spinning your wheels. So when you're changing those thoughts, I want you to act as if. Yep, I'm asking you to pretend. Pretend you have as much money as you want. Notice I didn't say pretend you have a job that gets you that, or pretend that you won the lottery or the mega bucks. That's a thing called outlining. And it's yet another topic for yet another podcast. Maybe I'll do outlining in the next episode. Right now, just pretend that you have as much money as you want. Don't think about how it's going to get there. Just pretend that it is. Sink into that feeling. Feel it. What would it feel like if I had unlimited money? Feel that. I don't know about you, but I get a sense of joy when I feel that. When I check in and I have a statement like that in myself and I feel it, I have joy. a little bit of freedom sometimes. Fun, play. Those are feelings. Feel those things when you're saying those statements. Those feelings coupled with your new thoughts, that's where we get the power. Say that, feel that. You're well on your way to abundance. And you keep doing that. And you repeat as necessary. Changing a thought, especially a thought pattern, is like changing any other habit. You got to do it consciously and repeatedly for a little while. I think it's like 3 weeks or something. Doesn't take long. Every time you think in terms of lack, limitation, or not enoughness, change the thought and replace that thought with thoughts of abundance and feel what it will feel like when there's abundance in your life and repeat as necessary. Now, a couple of caveats here. Do not, under any circumstances, tell yourself that you're a bad person for having the limiting thoughts in the first place. Do not do that. There is no bad. By the way, I'm referring you in my show notes to see Love It All in my book, because this will talk about that. Secondly, search for and become grateful for the places in your life where abundance already occurs. Now, I was doing this little exercise at one point, and I was looking around going, okay, where do I see abundance in my life? And I found a bunch of areas where I saw abundance and looked at abundance. But the one that just jumped out at me right away, weeds. Yep, weeds on my property. Weeds. And I looked around at all those weeds, and I looked around at the fact that I got to pull those little suckers every day. And I looked around at the fact that at my age, 71 years old, I got to get help to pull all the weeds, because out here where I live in the back 40, those weeds grow big. Knee-high, guys, we're talking knee-high weeds. Bigger on me, 5 feet tall on a good day. Some of those weeds take some strength to pull, and I need help to weed them. I have an abundance of weeds. Get grateful for that. I wouldn't have weeds if I didn't have a place for them to grow. Right? There you go. Find the abundance in whatever's showing up in your life. And guess what? You'll create more abundance. So the process in a nutshell, change your thinking and keep it changed and change your life. And that's not just a trite saying or a catchy little advertising blurb. It really works. So I have a few more quotes from Love and Law that might help you with this. I might, get the book. I mean, it's incredible. Okay, here's another quote. Ernest Holmes, Love and Law. Tonight, I want you to consider yourselves as the infinite or creative power. Okay. If you've listened to my podcast before, you know I take statements like these literally. I don't just say I'm the infinite and creative power if something happens or in that certain situation. I am the infinite and creative power. And because I believe that I'm the infinite or creative power, I'm empowered. Period. I'm strong. I'm powerful. That's it. I don't believe in a God that does things. I don't believe in a God that's in charge. You will never hear me give credit to God for the good things in my life. I give credit to God for my life. And there's a huge difference there. There's a difference between shallow religionistic stuff when you say, I give all credit to God for everything that's happened in my life. And when you say, I give credit to God for my life. That's deep mysticism right there, folks. That's where the stuff is. That's where the right good stuff is, right there. So I give credit to God for my life, period. Think about that. Discover that difference. It's huge. I believe in a God that's an energy force that is everywhere present. I believe that force created me and you so that it could experience the physical, meaning it's part of us and we're a part of it. I believe we have all the same power as that force, again, because it's part of us and we're a part of it. Okay, here's another quote. If you could see your thought and take a picture of it and your conditions, you would see no difference between them. There you go. Boom, right there. So this is about self-awareness. We look at our thoughts. If you could see your thought, well, we can see them. All we got to do is go within and see them, look at them, become aware of them. And now look at our life. Do you see a connection there? Chances are you do. Here's another quote. Recognizing that we are what we are because of that which we are gives us a basis upon which to work in order that we may become something of which we do not now appear to be. Okay, this is Ernest Holmes. He says stuff like this a lot. Once in a while, I like to lay one of these quotes on a live congregation and look at the deer in the headlights look that I get from them, which I'm sure you're throwing out there right now. This is just wonderful stuff. This is a real simple statement. Basically, what Holmes is telling us to do is begin where we're at. Again, no judgment for where we're at, no shaming. There are no shoulds in life. No judgment on ourselves, no telling yourself you're bad or somehow defective or whatever. The low self-esteem is out the window. Just begin where you're at and progress from there. I could go on and on with all these yummy quotes. Here's one more. It is not to the sentimental ones who gush and gush that big results come. It is to those who think deeply and simply and pertinently and persistently, and then because they know. And I want to specifically draw your attention to this part of the quote. It is to those who think deeply and simply and pertinently and persistently. Why do you think I say consistently and persistently every time I talk about doing spiritual practices? It comes from quotes like this. You know what? I'm really, really grateful. I'm grateful that almost 40 years ago, who would have thought? 40 years ago, I was introduced to a new way of living that advocated for daily spiritual practice. And it advocated not just for meditation and treatment and or prayer, which is what we do in Science of Mind. You know, in 12 steps, it says in the 11 steps sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood it. Yeah, prayer and meditation. In Science of Mind, it says treat every single day or pray and meditate. So when you ask a Science of Minder what their daily spiritual practice is, they say treatment and meditation. And I'm like, oh my God, why? Where is the self-awareness? The self-awareness piece, in my opinion, is the most important piece. And a lot of Science of Mind people miss that piece. How do you know what to treat for if you haven't done self-awareness? You got to know what's going on with you in order to know what to treat for or what to pray for. By the way, there's a link in there to a podcast on treatment. It's actually a series of podcasts. There's 4 of them, or 5 of them, 4 or 5. There's 5 steps in treatment, but I think I doubled up on 2 of them. You cannot know what to treat for unless you've got self-awareness first. And that's part of the creative process, by the way. Remember, we have a thought. How do we figure out what those thoughts are? Self-awareness, guys. How do we change the thoughts? Treatment. Consistent and persistent nagging. That's what this is. Okay. All right. Do the self-awareness part. Figure out what you're feeling and thinking. Change the thoughts when necessary. Use the power of treatment. And then meditate on the new thoughts. And that's that beautiful creative process in a nutshell. That's what Love and Law is all about. That's the deal. Do that repeatedly, consistently, and persistently. Get help to do it. Get a prayer partner if you don't have one. Don't know what prayer partner is? Contact me. I'll clue you in. It's pretty cool. It's not an accountability partner. So I am knowing fearlessly feral living for me and for you. I've had a little fun with this podcast. I hope you have too. Remember that Fearlessly Feral Living is a focused ministry of Centers for Spiritual Living, and thus everything you donate is tax deductible. So I've got a bunch of uh, links in the show notes where you can donate either one time or you can become a member of my Substack for, I think it's $8 a month. It's not much. Or you can also donate to Venmo or PayPal. Everything's listed on my Fearlessly Feral website at fearlesslyferal.org. So again, I am knowing fearlessly feral living for me and for you. And I thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you will contact me if you have comments or questions. Thank you again.